It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Howdy, ho there. Hey. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. How are you? We've got two guests today for you. First one up is David Ciccarelli. David is an entrepreneur who has created a company called Voices.com, which pairs voice actors with people looking for voice actors. He's had some great funding and has taken the company to bigger and better places since he started it with him and his now wife. He's got a great story to tell. He will be up first, followed by Bill Abernathy. Bill Abernathy is a singer-songwriter musician who's got a new album out called Crossing Willow Creek. We will talk about that, and we will be playing one of the tracks off the album. You can check him out at billabernathy.com. So lots to get to. We will be right back with David Ciccarelli.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. You're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Okay, please welcome to The Douglas Coleman Show, David Ciccarelli. Hi, David. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing very well, Douglas. Thanks so much for the time to chat today, and looking forward to speaking with you.
Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. You are the CEO and founder of a company called Voices.com, which... Do you represent voice artists and try to pair them up with work, or what is exactly does your company do?
Yeah, no, that's a great lead-in for sure. I mean, we think of Voices.com as being a marketplace, a freelancer marketplace where voice actors, people with great voices, maybe a background in performing arts, radio, TV, storytelling sometimes, and they're looking to utilize those God-given skills of a great voice and find work. And voiceover work ranges from radio and TV commercials, but more nowadays, we hear podcasts, audiobooks, voices on video games, apps, GPS, YouTube videos. It's a pretty phenomenal industry that covers a lot of different forms of media. And so Voices.com is that job website, if you will, that brings together the voice actors or talent who are looking for work, and then the advertisers and big brands or companies that are looking to hire a voice for their project.
Okay, so how do you get paid?
So we get paid by really, I would refer to it as consummating kind of a successful match. And so the actors audition for jobs that are posted to Voices.com, and they quote on how much they're willing to do the work for. So they might say, "This looks like a solid project. I'm going to charge $1,000," and we add on a 20% transaction fee on top of that. So the client, that might be from a Fortune 500 company, would see $1,200 of their price, which is $1,000 to the talent and $200 as a service fee to Voices.com for facilitating that project. So that's how we generate our revenue.
Okay. Well, you're doing something similar to my production company, which represents an occasional song that we try to get sync license deals for, and we just take a commission. So that
exactly.
Sounds similar to what you're doing, yeah.
Very, very similar. Then the difference, if I may, well, albeit quite subtle, is that the talent is driving, the performer is driving how much they want to get paid, and so we're always adding on top. And so they're in complete control of, you want $1,500, then you set that as your price. Or if it's a project you feel is pretty fast, it's a quick commercial, maybe it's a $200 or $500 job, they're in control of the price, and then we add a transaction fee on top of that.
Well, that's actually a better system, because when I'm shopping songs around, they dictate the price. There's no negotiation with the other end. They say, oh, well, we're looking for a song and we're going to pay $5,000. That's it. So, yeah, there's absolutely no bargaining with them at all. So I like that idea. I like that because it's more fair to the artist, yeah?
Well, we believe so, and it kind of defines that our position is the facilitator of that engagement, that transaction, and the talent is really we don't represent talent per se. We are merely the platform, just like Airbnb is a platform. They don't own properties, just like we don't own recording studios, or we're not the voice talent ourselves. Talent run out of their own home-based or local recording studios, really all around the world. It's pretty phenomenal. As I'm sure you're familiar, Douglas, the technology has changed over the years to really the point that, especially recording voiceovers, you can get that done with a digital home recording studio with an iMac or a computer, a good sounding microphone, in a quiet room. And so we've had really large national ad campaigns done from spare bedrooms and closet recording studios, because it sounds good and quiet, and it's a really skilled, talented artist that's breathing life into that script.
Well, you're right about the technology, because it used to be that you had to go to a professional recording studio to get anything that sounded decent. And now it can be done for the best thing is your microphone. The computer software is nothing. But microphones, you can spend $5,000 on a Neumann microphone if you want to. But
absolutely.
I don't think you really need that to do voiceovers.
You're right. A good microphone is certainly key, as is a quiet room. Maybe I'm stating the obvious here, but you don't want to be recording with babies crying in the background, or a dog barking, or even an air conditioning unit kind of humming. That can really kind of come through on the recording. And so you want as clean a recording as possible. When I went to school for audio engineering, learning how to record, edit, and mix and produce music, which is my background, I remember them saying, garbage in, garbage out. If the guitar's out of tune when you record it, you're not going to suddenly put it into tune afterwards. And if the drum heads, when you're hitting the drums, sound loose and kind of flappy, there's nothing you can do about that. And likewise, when a voiceover is recorded, if there's background noise, it's really hard to edit that kind of low-level hum out, or, especially if it's over the voice, right? And it's kind of a barking or a siren goes by outside. This is kind of hard stuff to deal with. So talent do invest a bit in making sure that their space is quiet.
Well, we have that issue occasionally with guests on this show, where people, and I know everybody's busy, and I like the idea that if I get actors or directors or musicians on and they're busy, because oftentimes they're not. And so I'm happy that they're working. But what they will do sometimes is they'll call into the studio on their cell phone, and they'll be driving, or they'll be at a restaurant. I had one guy call me from a wedding to do the interview. And
well, that you must be more important than the best man or the groom wow, that's quite flattering.
But what was funny about it was that he was sitting, this was like before the wedding, I think. I think it was actually the reception. It might have been after the wedding. But there was just, you could hear hundreds of people in the background, and you could hear dishes clanking and glasses and people moving stuff. And finally, I just said, look, can you move to a quiet room, the closet, and the bathroom, somewhere, just so we can finish this interview? And he did, but it just was funny. So to your point, yes, because I like to get a clean recording when we do the show, because this is going out on terrestrial radio, it's going out all over the internet, and you don't want it to sound like that when you're going to have a lot of people listening to it. Absolutely agree. I did want to ask you, how did you start this thing? Why don't you give us the background of Voices.com? How did this come about?
Yeah, it's a funny origin story, quite interesting. I assure you it's not a love story. You might think it's going there. After graduating from that audio engineering school, I actually opened up a small recording studio here in London, Canada, which is about an hour out of Toronto. and I actually got my name in the local newspaper on my birthday of all days. My dad gave me great advice when starting this business, the studio. He said, look, I was trying to figure out how to get some publicity, and he said, oh, you can either, advertise and be in the classifieds on page 12. That's an option, sure. Why don't you give the local newspaper a call and tell them you're opening up a new small business and see if they can include you in their business section? And sure enough, they did. And that article actually not only attracted other small businesses, but it also attracted this lovely young woman, Stephanie, who's now my wife, and we've been married for all these years, starting the company. But that's how we met. And she came in to record her singing repertoire. You see, she was a classically trained singer. She'd sing at weddings and funerals and special events and the like. And so she came in to do a singing demo, and so she could get hired for future gigs. And at the same time, there were other small businesses. There was a hair salon and an event management company that both wanted a female voice to record some phone system greetings. And having just met Stephanie the day before, I figured, hey, she's the only girl I know really in the city, and if I give her a call, maybe she'd come down to the studio, and she did just that. So my pitch to her was, I'll be the engineer, and you be the voice talent, and we'll split the money. I've got these gigs. I need your help. And that's how it really all began. And we realized not only did we enjoy working with each other, clearly, because that led to us spending more time and ultimately getting married and starting a family, but us realizing that there is a need for businesses to hire voice talent for these type of projects, phone systems and commercials and so forth. And so we built a pretty primitive site, to be honest with you, a website that advertised our services, and that actually attracted other freelance voice talent from New York and LA that did character voices, or people who spoke Spanish, and this guy in Quebec who spoke en français, and they said, hey, can I be on your website? And we always said, yeah, sure, we'll create a profile and list your name here. And next thing you know, we had a few dozen talent listed on our website. And we also were starting to get inquiries saying, I see this name of this person on your website. How do I get in touch with them? And so that was our aha moment of pivoting from running a recording studio into really recreating ourselves as running an internet-based company, this big job website, which has now become voices.com.
Okay, I want to read this that's on your bio here, and it says, you successfully raised $2 million in funding from the Business Development Bank of Canada, followed by $18 million Series A funding from Morgan Stanley Expansion Capital, located in San Francisco. So if my math skills are correct, you have raised $20 million from two different places. What do you do with all that money for this kind of a project? Did you buy an office building? Or something? Not quite. It's fascinating that sometimes the perception can be, and we actually dealt with this for a number of years. Oh, it's an internet company. It's just like a couple computers running in a closet somewhere. Why would you need staff? And precisely that. What's the capital raise for? And what we found is there's a pace of growth that we can achieve organically, kind of on our own. And we were growing at a pretty healthy clip. And really, the sources of cash that is needed to grow a company is often first and foremost, cash from customers, where you're delivering a product or service that people find valuable and they're paying you for it. And then if you want to grow faster, you can take on some debt, often bank financing to help you grow faster. Maybe it's investing in sales and marketing. Maybe it's building out a product or innovation team to invest in create the next new product. Maybe it's just systems that you need a new accounting system or a customer relationship system. And so that kind of gets you to the next stage. And then finally, at a certain point, we realize, well, in order
to continue to scale and grow at the pace that we were, we really needed to bring on outside investors. And this isn't debt. This is where people are investing money into your company in exchange for a small piece, where they actually own a part of the company. And so Morgan Stanley, a global investment bank, has an office in, as you said, San Francisco that's identifies promising tech companies that have been what they call bootstrapped. Basically, they're often the first institutional investors that come in. Up to that point, the company was pretty scrappy and built things on their own. But now they're looking to come in and believe that they can be supportive in professionalizing the organization. And what I mean by that is, instituting some of those systems, maybe improving the process, but also having a board of directors. And so as Stephanie and I were husband and wife and founders in the company, we realized in order to grow to, again, that next level once again, that we would gain the expertise and advice from our investors, and having an outside perspective with the board of directors that now we actually report to. And so the use of, so that's kind of the evolution of where we are now. But to answer your specific question around the use of funds, really most of it is around sales and marketing. So when you have a platform or a website, if you will, that is working like voices.com is, most of the markets, and I've spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley and tech centers around the world, most markets or industries, it's a winner take all, or at least a winner take most. There's a 1-2 kind of prominent players or companies within that space. And so it's a bit of a land rush. Like you want to grow as big and as quickly as possible to be the one or the two, number one or number two company in that given space. And so that's means that you invest in advertising online, sales trips to meet your best customers, attending events, speaking at events, telling the story over and over. And that has been the biggest kind of use of proceeds. The good news is the company's continuing to thrive, and we maintain a great relationship with our investors at Morgan Stanley.
So let's just define that for people that might not know what that means. If you get an investor, it's not really a loan. You're selling them essentially stock in the company, correct?
Yep, that's exactly it. So they own a small portion of voices.com. Now, an investor, as you said, you're not paying them back, the same amount plus 10% like a normal bank loan. Investors, whether it's, there's different, sizes and tiers of investors, but a good rule of thumb is they're expecting 3 times their money back in something like 3 to 5 years. So they're looking for, it's said like this, 3 to 5x or 3 to 5 times their return in 3 to 5 years. So you can get a sense for how big we need to grow to meet their expectations in the next 3 to 5 years is really tripling or quintupling in that time period. And so it's definitely a heightened sense of pressure to a degree, which I think is healthy, but also creates a lot of focus. We're focused on the things that work, and less experimentation in trial and error. We're very methodical about making good decisions and following those through. But you're right, bringing on investors is literally that, selling a small piece of your company to the investor, and they're buying it from you. So they give you the money, and you give them shares of your company.
So what happens if you don't make the 3 to 5 timeline?
Yeah, so there's a couple outcomes, and I think this is just the reality. On the downside, not every company succeeds, and we're fortunately beyond that initial early startup phase where it's a guy and a gal in a co-working space, or 2 guys in a garage, that kind of stereotypical Silicon Valley startup story. there's about a 90% risk of likelihood of failure, 90% failure rate in the first 5 years of those type of startups. Given that we're a decade into this, we're more on the scale up phase. So we've moved past those early days into that second one. And so the risk of an outright failure is certainly decreased. So looking at, well, what are the outcomes from here? Now, optimistically, that could be, one of the things that we're working towards. Maybe someday we'll be a publicly traded company. That means getting a listing on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ, where a lot of tech companies are listed. Alternatively, maybe there's a bigger organization, a big media company or a production facility that wants to buy voices.com. So that could be an outcome. Or perhaps other investors come in and say, hey, we want to buy out the shares from Morgan Stanley, and they're now the new investors. So I think those are all possibilities. But in the meantime, what we're focused on is really building a world-class company and focused on the day-to-day, hitting our monthly and quarterly numbers and being true to the vision that we set of having a positive impact on the world through the human voice, the words that we hear every day. So I think if you can kind of hang your hat on a few of those, having good values, having a reason, sticking to the reason that you started the company in the first place, I got to remain optimistic here, and that the outcome will be a positive one for all those involved.
Do you have a company in your head that you would think might be a good purchaser of your company?
If you think of one of the fastest growing pieces of technology right now are these smart speakers, and so smart speakers are, for those that might be unaware, there's 100 million of these devices, actually just in the U.S. alone, which are exactly what it sounds: a speaker that sits often in your kitchen or bedroom that you can talk to. And so if you've heard of Alexa. Or the Google Assistant, where you're asking questions, what the weather is, setting reminders. They're now, it's not just Alexa. A lot of companies are producing applications, basically a voice app. Just like you have a smartphone app, you're going to have a voice app, whether it's for the Weather Channel or sports scores or, local news. So a radio that you could kind of speak to and interact with your voice. And so as companies create, I think the number one app, voice app on Alexa is the Jeopardy one. And so people, games and that type of thing. And so I think to answer the question, I think, maybe an organization like Google, they have a big smart speaker division and are looking for, people that can record voice applications. The other one might be Amazon for much of the same reason. And there's a whole host of job websites or freelancer websites that would be great partners for us at the outset, and maybe they're partners for the long haul as well too. So those are some of the companies that, just at surface level might make sense.
Are you worried that computer-generated voices would put you guys out of business? That
is the existential threat for sure. Now, we've worked, one of our partners actually is a synthetic voice. So these computer-generated voices or synthetic voices,
right,
is really, if you think of is really that competitive, long-term competitive threat. I think of it this way, that there is a time and a place for that type of technology where the content is very transactional, meaning I'm asking, what the weather is, or turn-by-turn directions in a car, or a little, a clip that's kind of read out over, the announcements change all the time, so it's difficult for a human to record them. For instance, announcements in an airport.
Right, I was just going to say that, yeah.
These or train stations where the trains are kind of coming, which platform you need to get on. You're not going to have a voice actor re-record those fresh every day. It really is, as you said, computer generated. The longer the time frame where you need to listen to that content, where it's less, transactional, less informational, but more entertainment, then the human voice is going to be very hard to disrupt. People are, they want to get lost in the moment and not be distracted by, it sounds like a robot or sounds kind of buzzy. When you're listening to an audiobook and a really wonderful storyteller or narrator is telling you that story, that's the kind of thing that people tend to get lost in. Or animated productions, long Disney or Pixar animated movies, DreamWorks animated movies. These are all actors that are, right. Lending their voices to these characters. So I think there's a time and a place for that technology, but there's lots of instances where people want to listen to people perform and deliver that level of emotion that really only a human can do, at least for the foreseeable future. And I'm talking like 10 years. We've spoken to really speech experts we spent some time at MIT, investigating this technology and working with partners. And I mean, these are some of the brightest minds in the world. And they've even concluded that this is probably about 5 to 10 years away, where the moment will be when the human voice, when a computer-generated voice is indistinguishable from the human voice. That's when you kind of know that, wow, that technology is ready. But it's pretty far from that. We're all pretty sensitive to, like, it doesn't sound natural. So I think we've got some time to adapt, and then even still over the long run, I do think there's an element of emotion that genuinely can come from a person performing and acting and delivering their best into what we're hearing.
Well, I hope that's true. And there was that one movie, and I forget the name of it, but it was the little kid on the train that goes to the North Pole, and Tom Hanks. They still used real voices, but the computer-generated animation was almost lifelike. Do you know the one I'm talking?
Was it the Polar Express?
The Polar Express. That's the one. Did you see that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, look at computer-generated graphics of, are so phenomenal.
They're close.
And you're right.
They're close.
Yeah, they're getting very close, and it's a fraction of the cost of going out on set in a lot of cases. And so for big productions like that, and it's a certain look, and not everybody necessarily wants that. Great for scenery, right. But when it comes to the people, though, you don't really see people moving, like a computer-generated person, unless it's for, again, for effect, like it is a robot, as an example. But no, it's really interesting times, certainly that we live in, and the creative element. I kind of need to believe that people are inherently creative and express themselves creatively through emotion, and that either comes to the way they speak or perform, or the way they move, and that is really, when done well, it's really kind of special to see somebody in a performance. And same thing with the voice acting; it's a performance as well too.
Well, I agree with you, and I hope that the human voice and us as human beings have some sort of relativity in this world, and we don't end up like the Matrix, at least not in our lifetime. David, we got to wrap this up. We actually went over a little bit, but that's okay. Your website is voices.com. People that are voice actors or people looking for voice actors should come and check it out, yeah?
That would be great. And if you want to connect with me or our company, we're obviously also all on social media. Probably Twitter's a great place, and it's just @voices, VOICES on Twitter. So we can chat there.
All right, super. David, thank you so much for coming on. This was a fascinating conversation. Best of luck with this company. Hope it does very well.
Oh, thank you so much. My pleasure.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps, record producer. This is my story about Elton John, working with him in those early years, going back to 1967 at Dick James. all the amazing tours, those first recordings, going through the Rocket Records, and it's an amazing story about his incredible rise to stardom and my part in that. So look forward to taking you on that journey. So here we go. Yeah, and to order this great audio CD, please just email me at stuartepps@talk21.com. That's Stuart, Stuart, Epps, EPPS, at talk, TALK, 21 in figures.com. Stuart Epps at talk21.com. Email me and I'll give you all the details for buying this brilliant audio disc. Thank you. Bye.
Are you an independent musician? How would you like to have your songs played on hundreds of radio stations just like the one you're listening to right now? Join MusicSubmit.com and we'll promote your music to radio stations and blogs in your genre. It's free to set up your account, and we guarantee your music will be considered for airplay by radio stations worldwide. Why not sign up today? It's free. MusicSubmit.com. Radio promotion for indie musicians.
The Douglas Coleman Show is now offering a complete radio promotional package for music artists. Your track will air 28 times a week for 1 month over all of our online and terrestrial platforms, as well as permanently archive on Spreaker, iTunes and many other sites. Your profile will also be featured in our featured music artists page on our website. With this package, you will also get a 15-minute interview on our show to promote your latest single, EP, LP, or upcoming gig. Similar packages like this can run hundreds of dollars and often are subscription-based. Our package has a one-time fee of just $49.99. Please go to douglascolemanmusic.com/CRPP. That's douglascolemanmusic.com/CRPP for complete details. Let's work together to get your music heard.
Tired of living in a culture of lies, fake news, and alternative facts? The Pro-Truth Pledge reverses the tide of lies by calling on politicians, and everyone else, to commit to truth-oriented behaviors. The pledge asks signees to commit to 12 behaviors that research in behavioral science shows lead to truthfulness, such as clarifying one's opinions and the facts, citing one's sources, and celebrating people who update their beliefs toward the truth. Private citizens who sign the pledge get the benefit of contributing to a more truth-oriented society. Public figures get more substantive rewards for signing the pledge in the form of positive media and public recognition. The pledge crowdsources the truth by asking volunteers to evaluate the statements of public figures who sign the pledge. Take the pledge, demand that your elected representatives do so, and encourage your friends to take it at protruthpledge.org.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! Ooh, don't know my own strength.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Bill Abernathy. Hey, Bill, how are you?
I'm doing great, Douglas. How are you today?
Doing just fine. Thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. You know, I think you and I have very similar backgrounds. I was reading over your bio, and I'm also a singer-songwriter musician, and you and I both started as teenagers doing this, and then life took us somewhere else, and we came back to it many years later. Is that about accurate for your life, yeah?
Yeah, that's kind of my story. I was very involved in music and musical activities when I was young, and then life happened, and I ended up having kids and did the career thing, and lived in the big blue house on the hill and all those things. And when my kids finished their collegiate careers and got out on their own, I kind of went back and said, I've been writing songs all these years. I ought to see what they could do for me and what if anybody'd be interested in listening. So, that's when I kind of got back into music and started playing a little bit and done all the recording projects and all that to date. So, I always kind of think I'm doing it backwards. Music is supposed to be a young man's game, and maybe I'm not as young as I once was. So it's always fun. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Can I ask how old you are?
I'm 61.
Oh, you and I are I'm 57, so we're pretty close.
Good.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about our particular adventure with music is that the industry has changed so radically from the time that you were a teenager, that we were teenagers, to now. For me, it wasn't so much having to adjust to writing again. I've been writing a song, and that is the same process for me that it's always been. But having to deal with the industry being completely different and everything online and everything, there's so many good points and bad points to the way it's changed. So how have you handled all of that?
It is different, clearly, than in when we were younger, the industry itself. But I actually think it's better, to be honest with you. So, back in the day, it was the make an album, grind it out, tour, play in a million different places, most of which you didn't want to play, really. And in today's world, you can kind of pick and choose, so you could use the internet and all the opportunities that are out there, social media, you websites, pick a music service that's out there, whether it be iTunes or Amazon or Apple or whoever, and it's a different way to get your music out there and a different way to communicate with your fan base. But to be honest with you, it's pretty effective, and it's a nice change. So in my age, one of the things that I didn't particularly care for in my youth was all the traveling. And, you can limit that quite a little bit these days and still develop a pretty substantial fan base and get your music out there and communicate with your fans actually a lot easier than you could back in the day, if you would. So I think it's different, clearly. But I also think that there's a lot of real positive things about the industry today that we can take advantage of.
Well, I have to agree with you. The one thing that has certainly changed is that it's much less necessary to search out the almighty signing with a major label.
Yeah, that is true. I think that the popularity of indie music and all that is really, and of course the technology. It used to be that the production of music was so expensive that you had to have a major label behind you, and along with just the production of the music itself, just the publications and to get the music out in contact with the radio stations and all that. You really had to be with a major label to get your music out there where people could hear it, where they know who you are. And in today's world, again, using the available technology and then some great services. There are a lot of really good services out there that you can use from an indie music standpoint to get your music out. I happen to be using MTS Productions, Michael Stover and his team, to promote my Crossing Willow Creek album. And he's doing a great job, and my music's out there. A lot of people are getting the opportunity to hear it and interface with me, and we communicate. And so I think that it's different, sure, but I also think that it's actually better. So, in my opinion.
Well, you're certainly right about the costs. I remember when I first hooked up with a band and I was 18 years old. I was lucky that one of my bandmates had a buddy who had a full-blown 8-track one of those Ampex machines like the Beatles used to use in his basement, and he had his whole basement done as a professional studio, and he was renting out time to local musicians. This was in New York, to make demos and things like that. He paid more for the studio equipment than he did for the house. And it was just really funny, And I'd never been in a studio like that in my life. And I thought, wow, this is great. That studio that he's got, or that he had then, you can do on the computer with a couple $100 worth of software. So, I mean, it's really changed.
Yeah, so this is an area where I am still a little bit old school. So I do have, a lot of technology and a lot of, software that I use at home. I typically only use that to record practice stuff. When I'm writing a song, I'll knock it out and make a quick recording, listen to it, try to get a feel for the structure and, how the lyrics are working together and what the music's working with the lyric and all that. But I am old school in the fact that I still do, to this date, go to a real recording studio to do all my real production work, the album work and all that. And, I bring in some really fantastic musicians that come in and work with me at the studio, and there's still that professional studio relationship that I have. That I really enjoy that space. I enjoy that time, and it's kind of like a big break for me. I do the corporate thing, Monday through Friday, and the music thing is really a nice break for me to do something completely different. So I still do real recording studios, and I think there's some value to that as well.
Do you record analog on tape?
It depends.
Okay.
No, I don't. Most of the stuff that we do is all digital.
Okay.
That said, when we finish a project such as Crossing Willow Creek, through the mastering process, we master it to tape, and then we remaster it from tape back to digital. I think that it makes I think when you take it to tape, it expands the sound a bit, and makes the sound a little bit bigger, a little bit warmer. And then when you pull it back, when you pull it back from analog to digital, it holds on to some of that warm feel. So, we go through that process. So,
well, I agree with you. I still like listening to scratchy old vinyl records through two speakers. Something about listening to music on my phone in a little, earbud is fine if you're out and about and whatever. But if I really just want to come home and sit and listen to something, I still much prefer listening to vinyl records. You're right. It's just the warmth of it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you completely. I think that this is another advantage/disadvantage of technology. In today's world, we use MP3 format, substantially. Most anything that you can hear streamed online is going to be in an MP3 format, and that technology really just takes this great big wide sound that you created and compresses it a lot, and relies on your brain a bit to understand the pieces of the music that they've taken out during the compression. Your brain kind of puts it back in, and I don't understand all that technology and how that works, but MP3s, are really not the full sound of the album. It's really a bit of your mind putting sound in there that you think should be there. So
I agree.
It's interesting. Yeah,
it is interesting. The one thing, speaking of all of this, the one thing I saw was a little clip of James Taylor talking about the difference between then and now, because he's been through the whole thing from the start to now. And he said back in those days, he said you still needed a connection to get your foot in the door. But once you got in the room, you were the only one in there. He says now the door has been kicked wide open, and anybody can walk in. But once you're in there, there's a million other people in there you got to fight with.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the and I agree wholeheartedly with that. But I also think it's one of those things that it depends on how you look at it, right? It can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. There's a lot of competition out there for your music, and I think one of the things that some artists do, and I certainly attempt to do, is to make my music a little bit different. And it's something that maybe a sound or a song or a lyric or whatever that kind of sets it apart a little bit, you know. And one of the ways that we try to accomplish that is to use multiple different genres of music in our recordings. You know, if you listen to the Crossing Willow Creek album, you know, you're going to hear some rock and roll, you're going to hear some country, you're going to hear some folk, you're going to hear some jazz, you're going to hear some blues, and a lot of that has to do with the process that I go through when I write songs. But we try to really stay quite diverse in what we're putting out from a genre standpoint, and it's always fun to me. You know, I was looking just the other day that you know, of the hundreds and hundreds of radio stations that are playing our music, it goes all the way from country to soul to, you know, contemporary stuff to folk to rock and to blues. So it's fun to have one project that has really hit all those different genres. So that's one of the things that we try to do to kind of separate ourselves from everybody else, is not to just replicate a sound over and over and over again, and try to do something a little bit different.
Well, that's great. And that was also a great segue, because we've got your album, Crossing Willow Creek, and I'd like to play one of the tracks right now. Why don't you pick one that you want us to play, and we'll play it.
Well, there's a couple that have been out. So our original release from Crossing Willow Creek was a tune called Cry Wolf, and now we've released a second single from that album of a tune called Changes, and it's the one that's kind of out and really starting to track hard now. So if you were going to play one, we can play Changes, and then we can talk about it a little bit.
Okay. This is Changes by Bill Abernathy.
I'm sitting here lonely in this empty room, wondering which way life is gonna take me now. I thought I had a program, I thought I had a plan. All this has gotten changed somehow. There's places in our lives that come and go, teaching us what we do and do not know. But change always teaches us to read everything we're destined to be. Change is never easy, though it happens so frequently. It seems only to keep us all confused. But I can see more clearly now, through the changes I've made, stepping out of the old into the new. Yeah, I did. There's places in our lives that come and go, teaching us what we do and do not know. But change always teaches us to read everything we're destined to be. Well, I got caught in the drift, but I rode with the tide, 2 wheels off a cliff. I'm still surviving. Guess I'm gonna go through some more changes. Well, I've had a season to rest my mind. It's been a very revealing time. Guess I'm gonna go through some more changes. of understanding all the change, but I haven't gotten there quite yet. You see, all I really understand is that it's made me such a better man. I can't wait to see what happens next. No, I can't, 'cause places in our lives that come and go, teaching us what we do and do not know. But change always teaches us to read everything we're destined to be. Well, I got caught in the drift, but I rode with the tide, 2 wheels off a cliff. I'm still surviving. Guess I'm gonna go through some more changes. Well, I've had a season to rest my mind. It's been a very revealing time. Guess I'm gonna go through some more changes. Well, I guess I'm gonna go through some changes. I guess I'm gonna go through some changes, yeah. I guess I'm gonna go through some changes. I guess I'm gonna go. Guess I'm gonna go through some changes.
Oh, yeah, very nice. Yeah, I like that. That's great.
Thank you. That song kind of exemplifies what we've actually been talking about. You know, the one constant that each of us have in our lives is change, and you and I have both experienced that quite a bit just in the musical part of our lives. So I always laugh about the song "Changes" could probably have 50 verses. Because you know the change that we go through, in our lives constantly is always a good story to tell, I think. Yeah.
Oh, very true. What genre would you classify that as? I'm thinking new country / what they used to call blue-eyed soul.
Yeah. So again, that's interesting. It all depends on what radio station's playing it, I suppose. I call it folk rock, is what I call it.
Okay.
Of course, the Changes song has, when I wrote it, I wanted to really, model the music to the message of the song. So it starts off real pretty with all the piano stuff and all that, and then we kind of kick it a little bit into more of a rock or a country rock feel, and then we break it back down and kick it back up, and tried to use the music to really exemplify the lyric and amplify what the lyric had to say. So it's called Americana. I was just looking at some of the nominations that we've gotten for different things for that particular song, and they want to call it Americana, which is a genre that I think just is a catch-all. We don't know what to call it. It's not pure rock. It's not pure country. It's not pure folk. We'll call it Americana. So that's what they tend to want to call my music.
There's way too many genres out there. That's one bad thing about if technology created all these genres, then I think that's a bad thing. There weren't that many genres back when I was a teenager, so it was much easier to classify people's music.
Yeah, I think that when I was coming up and learning to play it, even when I was doing what I did when I was young, the genre that I thought that I felt in was called country rock, which was the Eagles and Poco and those kind of bands, and then mixed with a little bit of singer-songwriter stuff like James Taylor and Jackson Browne, Dan Fogelberg. But in today's world, it just depends on what somebody else wants to call it. So I just kind of take it and say, well, I don't really care what you call it. I don't care what box you put it in. I'm just glad you're listening and folks are enjoying it. So.
Right. And then there was, the Southern rock genre like the Allman Brothers and Leonard Skinner, those guys. But all of that is kind of like new country now.
It is, yeah. So it's kind of... I like what Dave Mason said. He had an album that came out, and he said, I think the name of the album, I think, was 12 Notes and 28 Letters, right? So all music is made out of the same thing. It's the same basic formula, right? You've got the notes of the scales, and you've got the letters in the alphabet, and how you've put those together depends on what the song's going to be, and also, what genre it's going to be. I was always kind of a fan, actually, back in the day, of what we called arena rock. So the super groups, if you would, Kansas, Boston, Styx, those bands. I always enjoyed that because I thought they were the music that they created was a bit more complex, not only from musical standpoint, but also in particular with the band Kansas, very interesting and intricate lyrical content as well. So I was always a fan of those guys.
I love Kansas. I'm a big fan of theirs. Another one that was an arena rock was like Blue Oyster Cult. They were kind of in there too.
Oh yeah, yeah, man. I still remember the wasn't it Blue Oyster Cult that was did the famous Saturday Night Live bit with more cowbell? Wasn't that them? I think it was. Yeah.
No. Well, there was a parody.
Don't fear the Reaper.
It was more a parody cowbell. Of their song. Yeah, absolutely.
Always makes me laugh. Yeah.
So on this particular track, you are singing.
Yeah, on the Changes song. So I do all of the lead vocals on all of our work, and on the Changes album, I had quite a group of different musicians that worked with me on that particular song. So, I do most of the acoustic work, the acoustic guitar work, some electric guitar work, and then I have some really, really talented studio musicians that come in and work with me on some of the other things. So I can play the keyboards a bit, but I can't play them nearly as well as they do. Lead guitar is something that I can do, but I'd much rather just show somebody that does that for a living what I need to be, what I think needs to be played, and then they kind of take it and put their own spin on it. I do not play drums, so we bring in different musicians to do that.
Bill, we got to wrap this up. The album is called Crossing Willow Creek by Bill Abernathy. Do you have a website you want to give out? People come check you out?
Yeah, I do, and it's pretty complex. It's just BillAbernathy.com. So if you go out there, you'll be able to see a little bit about us and see some of the work that we've done, the albums that we've done in the past. There's a whole bunch of different media releases and album reviews and interviews and that kind of stuff that are out on the website. Also, if you are still of the type people that like to have hard copies of music, you can order that directly from my website. I always say that if you order something from my website and give me an idea, maybe send me a little note through my website. I'll personalize everything that I sent out to you, and we'll develop a relationship one fan at a time, if you would. So, but BillAbernathy.com. I'm also fairly active on social media, though, right now. Evidently, I got hacked last week in my social media world, so some of my social media is currently dead. It will be back. But right now, the best place to contact me is through BillAbernathy.com.
Okay, super. Bill, thank you so much for coming on the show. Best of luck with the album. I hope it does really well.
Well, thank you, Douglas. We've seen some success with this album to date, and I expect it to continue on for a bit. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. Love what you do. Appreciate everything that you do, because without you guys, without you and the publications that you put out and the interviews that you do with the various artists, including myself, nobody would know who we are and where we are. So very, very important part of this indie world that we operate in, and I appreciate what you do.
Well, thank you very much. It's nice to hear that.